Hi everyone, and welcome to another episode of Radiant Central, and I'm your host Natasha St. Michael, and thank you so much for joining me. So yesterday I did a video on flour. Someone had asked me what my opinion was on flour and whether it should be included in a healthy diet and how much. And I received a few questions from people regarding this video that I want to address today while the subject is still fresh, and it's good to answer the questions and then move forward onto other things. So the first question that I received was about homemade flour and freshly milled flour that you make at home using either a spice mill or a flour mill or even a high-speed blender. You can make flour at home doing that. So what about those flours? And I have to say that these type of flours are definitely different than the store-bought flour that you might be buying, or the store-bought goods that you're buying from a health food store that are made out of flour. Okay, huge difference. As I mentioned yesterday, that if you want to stick to a healthy diet, what you want to be eating is fresh whole foods. You know, foods that what you see is what you get. So if someone goes to a grocery store or a health food store and they buy like a bag of grains and they come home and they think, you know what, I'm going to put this through the mill and I'm going to make a flour and then I'm going to bake some goods out of it. Or then the next day they take those same grains and they cook it into a meal. Those grains started off being a whole grain. You know, it's a whole real food. And there's a big difference between that than buying foods at a health food store or a grocery store that are labeled, you know, that they're made out of whole grain flour and thinking that's a health food. There's a big difference between buying already made, factory made foods compared to making your own flour and making your own homemade food. Huge difference. Okay, so I just want to point that out and answer this question that, yeah, you know, if you are milling your own flour and making your own goods out of it, fantastic, you know, but at the same time, you don't want to have a diet that is sort of a flour-based diet. You don't want to be eating these goods 3 times a day. And I see this a lot with a lot of people that turn to a vegetarian or vegan diet, you know, is that suddenly they drop the meat or the animal products and they replace it with a lot of flour-based foods. And these flour-based foods that they're eating are not foods that they're making at home. These are things that they're buying at the health food store, the grocery store, that are labeled that they're made out of whole grain flour, and they're eating this for breakfast, lunch, and dinner, day in and day out, week after week, month after month, year after year. And it's not a healthy diet to be doing that. You know, you need to be eating fresh foods. And someone that's milling their own flours and making goods out of it, as long as they're not having it day in and day out every single day, then it's fine. It's great. It's another way of preparing your whole grains. That's it, you know. But it's understanding the difference between starting off with a whole grain yourself and making something out of it compared to going to a grocery store and buying a processed grain that was processed in a factory, made into flour. That flour might have been sitting in that factory for a few years before it's even packaged and sold. You know, so that it's not a fresh food what you're getting from a grocery store compared to milling your own grains. Okay, so there is a difference there. And for those two that have asked me about eating coconut flour or almond flour, you know, that's kind of the same thing. If you make your own almond flour out of a handful of almonds and you put it through a spice mill or a blender and make a flour out of it, and you want to make food out of that, fantastic, go ahead. But if you want to be making a lot of food out of almond flour that you're buying from from a grocery store that's been packaged in a factory, just remind yourself that, you know, it's okay to have that once in a while, but it's not the best food on earth. You know, it's a step up, definitely, from eating white refined flour. Okay, definitely a step up, but it's not the best food on earth. It's not a superfood to be eating a factory-made flour, no matter what it's made out of. Okay, but the thing is that it's definitely better than having white flour. Okay, so it's about figuring out, you know, like eating the foods that you want to eat, and using the best ingredients, but being aware as to like what, you know, where am I really getting the nutrition from, and where am I making better decisions with. You know, it's about having as much variety in your diet as possible, and also trying to get as much fresh foods in there. Okay, the aim is always to have fresh is best. But obviously not everything's going to be fresh, and not everything is going to be homemade. Not everyone could mill their own flour. You know, the majority of the population isn't milling their own flour. The majority of the population is definitely not even baking their own goods. Okay, and most people are relying on grocery stores to buy this stuff, and it's important to be aware that they might think it's a healthy whole food, but it's way better to be buying the actual whole grain and eating that as is, as opposed to buying foods that are made out of that whole grain flour. That's all I'm trying to say, is that go with the whole food, you know, as much as possible. Once in a while, if you want to have something that is bought from a grocery store, a health food store, that's made out of a flour, that's a whole grain flour, that's fine, you know, but don't have that for breakfast, lunch, and dinner and think that you're eating a super healthy diet. That's all. The other question that I received was, am I hating on gluten? No, I'm not. No, I'm not. And nowhere did I mention that in my video yesterday, okay? If someone does have an allergy to gluten, then they should be taking all glutinous grains and food products out of their diet, definitely. Okay, if someone has a sensitivity to it, same thing, take a break from glutinous products and foods. But if someone has no issue with it whatsoever, I don't see a need to be cutting it out of their diet. But if someone is trying to lose weight, or if someone is dealing with certain health conditions, not having a lot of flour-based goods will help them to lose weight, and it will help them to get better, because if they take out some of the flour-based goods, whether it has gluten in it or not, and they replace that with other fresh foods, they're going to get more nutrition. They're going to fill themselves up better with more whole foods as opposed to refined flour goods. Okay, that's all I'm saying, but I'm definitely not against eating gluten if you don't have a gluten allergy. Okay, so I hope my answers are clear. And yeah, that's it. So I'm wishing you guys a super fabulous day, and I'll see you again soon. Bye.